What's up, everybody? Welcome to the Real World Podcast. I am your eternal host, Matt Waters. I am even hostier this time because I've got literally nothing to add to the discussion for once. I am hosting this sumbitch. We are talking about the Oscars, the Academy Awards, if you will, the 89th Academy Awards. And because I've seen none of the films nominated, and we didn't just want to have Mike monologue for 2 hours, we've brought in another guest. And that other guest is intrepid traveller Jerome Cusson. Jerome, how are you, my friend? That's right, you get billing ahead of the founder of this podcast and website.
I believe that Mike Thomas is gonna try to have me killed, but thankfully he will have to do it before Monday, because on Monday I will be traveling to an unknown destination in China. So, Mike, if you're mad, you got to get me before then. So good luck.
I like how you make it sound so mysterious. Like, do you actually not know where you're going?
Do you show up at the airport and a man hands you an envelope? And
they're just like, yes. Take me to China.
Wouldn't it be great if it was like that?
Probably for everyone except you.
Certainly adds a little bit of mystery.
Yeah. Alright, well, my understanding is both of you, as dedicated film buffs, unlike me, who just gives it lip service, have watched all 9 films nominated for Best Picture at the Academy Awards. Is that correct? That is correct.
That's
okay.
Correct. That is correct.
All right. Well, we are recording this on a Thursday, but in theory, this will be uploaded on a Sunday, 2 weeks before the Oscars air. So you got 2 weeks to hear this. If there are any films that you're interested in seeing that you don't want spoiled, because I'm going to assume we're going to talk spoilers here. Yes. maybe save this one for a few days until you get around to seeing those films for the Oscars. I don't know. Live your life. Who am I to tell you what to do?
Yeah, I think we should just put a blanket spoiler warning that we will be spoiling all 9 of the Best Picture nominees for sure.
Yeah. And maybe just other stuff. Maybe we'll just throw some film spoilers from history out there just because we can. What's in the box?
Kevin Spacey was Kaiser Soze.
There you go. We both went Spacey, but different ways.
And I'm going to spoil Jackie by saying that John F. Kennedy died.
Oh, really? I was really hoping they'd do the rewrite. Okay. I say in theory this will be uploaded 2 weeks before. I will not upload this episode unless Mike changes the picture on our website from Sean Connery. So,
it's happening. It's happening.
It's happening. You've been telling me it's happening for ages. Anyway, these awards will be hosted by everyone's favourite mediocre TV comic, Jimmy Kimmel. Yeah.
You know, you say the part, but would we really rather have Jimmy Fallon? Come on, guys.
I mean, why do we have to pick?
Why isn't it me? I can host the podcast. I can host the Oscars. I mean, come on.
After Ricky Gervais, they may never let a British person host an American award show ever again.
I mean, okay, fine. So, this is the most serious we've been so far. I mean, we're not really being serious, but, we normally talk about Batman and X-Men and Star Wars. This is, big grown-up films. So, before we get into that, general thoughts on the Oscars generally, I'm really not a fan of the vague I get it, you want to celebrate talent and it's prestigious and whatnot, but I have issues with it generally. Jerome, have you got any hot Oscar takes you want to get off your chest before we get into this?
As a general rule, I get very frustrated by the winners many, many times, and I think this year is going to be no different, with La La Land being predicted to basically take all of the Oscars. It's nominated for 14, so I fully expect La La Land to dominate. And most years, I would say the Best Picture nominee is not the Best Picture of the year. But on the positive side, I think if you take the nominees as a whole, I think if you look at the 9 Best Picture nominees, I think they are very good representation of the best in film for the year. I have a hard time really identifying a lot of other films that could have been nominated in this category. So I think for the most part, like I said, there are 9 Best Picture nominees. I would say 7 of them at least deserve to be nominated for Best Picture. And I think if you go down the list and look at some of the other nominees, I think you can get a really good idea of some of the best performances of the year, some of the best documentaries. And, I know that there are a lot of theaters that will show some of the short documentaries and some of the short animated films. So if you have a chance to do that, that's something you should take advantage of as well. So overall, the Oscars themselves are a very frustrating and pretentious exercise. But I think if you just take a look at the nominees, I think it's a pretty good idea, and it'll give you a pretty good barometer of what you should be seeing on VOD or on DVD or however you choose to watch your films.
Sure. Certainly a little more diverse than they've been in years past. They got slammed. Was it last year or the year before? I don't know, but they
both last 2 years.
Yeah.
Yeah, last year was the infamous hashtag Oscars so white. So
that was following up another year of that happening. It was just that was the reaction to it.
My man Mike, my regular.
Yes.
What you got for me?
It's cliche to quote someone, obviously, but I think Ron Swanson pretty much put it best when he said, "Awards are stupid, but they're less stupid when they go to the right people." And I think that probably just sums up my feelings on the Oscars at this point. It's just a giant advertisement for quote-unquote prestige cinema in Hollywood. It's not something that should be taken all that seriously, but it can be a good guide for films to check out or performances you may not have ever seen. I mean, a perfect example of that for me is that I can't imagine a circumstance where I see Lion in any point in the next 10 years, and there are lots of things about Lion that I really enjoyed, so I'm really grateful for that. But what I think at this point for me, as someone who used to be very, very hardcore, must see every single movie possible in a year, to someone now who just doesn't make the time for it quite as much as he used to, I can at least appreciate it on it. Okay, here's a quick and easy bullet points for some interesting films that came out this year or notable films that came out this year. And so I appreciate it on that level. But yes, it's incredibly silly and stupid. But I think Jerome makes a good point, though, is that the nominees are kind of like a good guide for things to check out.
Yeah.
The winners, though, are entirely about they're just whatever narrative takes hold that on a given year. I think there's no way to do a perfect awards, but to me, I've always wanted to do something like a 5 or 10 year in retrospect kind of thing with just get a panel of people together, discuss what was actually the best in any given year.
Yeah.
But that seems mostly stupid to do, at least on our level. But hey, maybe that's the next project for us.
Yeah. We'll just
Oscars
curate everything.
Yeah, everything. Yeah, they're pretty stupid. I haven't watched a ceremony in years, but gives you a handy list to look at for movies to check out.
All right, so now we're all in agreement that these things are stupid. Let's talk about them for over an hour. So again, to keep this as brief as possible, we're only delving primarily into Best Picture nominees. So your nominees for Best Picture are Arrival, Fences, Hacksaw Ridge, Hell or High Water, Hidden Figures, La La Land, Lion, Manchester by the Sea, and Moonlight. This would be the time to point out if I've just made the most colossal error and written down the completely wrong films. But we've gone through this, so that's checkbox 1. So the way this is going to work, I'm basically going to go to you guys through the list alphabetically, one at a time, to start off the discussion. Jerome, as our guest, I'm going to let you choose. Would you like to talk about Arrival, or would you like to defer and have Mike talk about it, which will mean you would be talking about Fences first next?
I actually really want to talk about Fences first, so
okay.
I will let Mike go on Arrival.
All right, Mike. Talk to me about Arrival. And again, I have seen none of these films, and by the end of this discussion, I will be choosing who I believe should win the Best Picture. So your arguments are important. This is a game. It's to keep me entertained primarily. So, Mike, talk to me about Arrival.
Arrival's a pretty stupid fucking film. I'll say this: it's never boring. I was definitely compelled all the way through, but it's a 2-hour movie that essentially only has one character, that by Amy Adams, and I like Amy Adams. That's not like if you're going to that you can do far worse than Amy Adams if you're going to make a 2-hour movie about one character, but there's just so little going on in this movie. I mean, it's all building to this giant twist that is all pathos, and there's no logic to it whatsoever. There's no explanation to it whatsoever. I mean, the idea is that aliens have landed, and this person, Amy Adams, who we've been introduced to as in a quick montage start to film, her daughter died of cancer. She appears to be a single mother, but she's also like a Tolkien-level linguist, so she's brought in to translate these alien messages. And then in the end, we realize that somehow in this process, Amy Adams, like the aliens, does not function linearly in terms of time at all. So she's only able to communicate with them because time is a flat circle or some bullshit, and she's already communicated with them in the future, and this is the past, and she hasn't even had her daughter who's died of cancer yet, and she only realizes at the end. It's just so fucking stupid. I think there's like a skeleton here for a truly interesting movie. I think, and there were definitely some moments like that were powerful, if somewhat empty, like her choosing at the end to be like, okay, I'm going to make the choice to have this daughter that I know is going to die because now I know this is the future, this isn't my past, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Like, that's a powerful moment, even if it's relatively hollow. But, I mean, when you have a 2-hour movie, you've got Jeremy Renner just absolutely lifeless in a supporting role. Forrest Whitaker, Michael Stuhlbarg given nothing to do. I haven't studied Mandarin in 5 years, so Tzi Ma, who is the Chinese general in the film, probably best known for Rush Hour, a couple seasons of 24, to American audiences at least. He actually has a really good scene at the end that's probably like the closest thing to a character moment for any other character, but this is just a mess. I was expecting way better things from this just based on the hype, and the premise sounded interesting, at least. It didn't sound like your typical alien invasion film, if nothing else. So I have no idea why this is even nominated. Like, there's so little to hang its hat on.
I'm shocked to hear this. I heard this was some people think this is super good. I was quite intrigued by it, but hey.
I think it's definitely a movie that you have to have a lot of patience with, and because I think that what it wants to be is it wants to be a very smart science fiction movie, kind of following up on movies like Gravity and The Martian, and obviously Arrival is very different from those two films from a structure standpoint and from a plot standpoint and from, even the lack of action in the movie, because I think it wants to be a very intelligent film, and I think it wants to rise up even above something like The Martian or Gravity, but I'm not sure it's quite successful. I'm not nearly as negative on this as Mike is. I would actually like to watch this a second time. I think this is definitely one of those movies that you've got to give yourself a couple of watches, because there is a lot to process as far as the time goes, and some of the plot construction, which is not always clear. But I really like some of the visual elements in the film. As somebody who has studied language before and who teaches it, as a matter of fact, I did like some of the interactions with the aliens and some of the creative things that they had to do to communicate. So I think there's some really good individual scenes. I think there is, if you are someone who enjoys pathos, I think there are some very powerful moments throughout this film as well. I agree with Mike that all of the characters except for Amy Adams are woefully underwritten. I actually forgot that Forrest Whitaker was in this movie, so that should tell you how little he was developed. But for sure, I think Amy Adams should have been nominated. She was not nominated for Best Actress in a Leading Role, but I think she definitely should have been, because I think her performance is very good. So I am definitely not as negative on this as Mike is. I certainly will acknowledge that it is not perfect. And if I were ranking all of which I actually did, I actually ranked all 9, I would actually rank this number 7 of 9.
Ooh.
So oddly enough, I'd rank it 7 of 9 too.
Wow.
That just speaks to 2 of the other films we're going to talk about today. I do think you make a good point, Jerome, about, I mean, the visuals are definitely interesting. The idea, the way they use language in the film, like seeing that on screen is interesting. Amy Adams is, I think a very compelling actress overall, and she's no less compelling here than in a lot of other performances. There's just really not a whole lot there, and I think those big moments that they're going for are ultimately rather hollow. But I also agree that it's something I will watch again at some point, just because I was like, what? Like there is, despite not a lot going on, what is going on deserves a rewatch, if that makes any sense. I don't even think you need to be patient so much with this film, though, because I think because it's so different, it's really never boring. It's just, I don't know if the payoffs are worth the lack of character development. Like I said, like the other actors, they're not characters, they're ideas. And, that's not to say that can't work, that's never worked before, but in a movie where so much misses, you need something to fall back on. But yeah, it's okay. Like, it's very watchable. I think it's worth a watch, but it's not good. I can't imagine there aren't 100 movies this year in wide release that were better.
Something that ends up happening with some of these Best Picture nominee films is, I think we as movie viewers start to watch them in terms of, is this one of the best 9 movies of the year, and not just actually watching it and deciding if it's a good film. And, I'm not saying that Mike and I did this with any of these, but I think even subconsciously sometimes, I think you start to evaluate these films on a different level. And I think the same thing happens with some of the performances. I think you evaluate these films a little bit differently, and maybe you see them differently versus just going in and seeing them blind. And I'm actually going to talk about this with one of the films a little bit later, contrasting my viewing experience. Mike, I don't know how you feel about that.
There's no doubt when, you specifically go to Amazon, buy the movie because it's nominated for Best Picture, you're expecting something more from this than some random shitty movie on Amazon that you're watching on your Prime account that you're just looking to kill some time with. But considering how I did that with so many other films this year, I wouldn't really say that colored my experience of this film versus the others, which I did enjoy a hell of a lot more.
Do we think at all this got a nomination in an effort to sort of show diversity in the kind of film that gets nominated for an Oscar? Because, there were the jokes heading into it that Deadpool was maybe going to get some nominations for something, and obviously I think it got nominated for, the unimportant categories. Heavy shot to the people that work in those industries. But, Arrival is if you look at this list, one is not like the other, and I would say it's definitely Arrival. And do you think this is their token effort to include a film that is slightly more mainstream, slightly less highbrow? I don't know. Jerome, what do you think?
I don't know about that. I think arguably Hidden Figures and La La Land are more mainstream than even Arrival was.
Okay.
So
I'd agree. I'd agree with that.
Having seen none of them, that one just strikes me as this is a sci-fi film, and even those seem like they're quite high concept. I don't know. But I
think some people would make the argument that Hacksaw Ridge is actually more mainstream than Arrival is as well. So okay. I think Arrival was filling in the smart science fiction spot that movies like Gravity and The Martian have filled in the past. So that's I think.
Just from trailers and stuff, it seemed a little bit quite out there, but I don't know. Anyway, that's Arrival. Currently sitting by default at number 1 in our official rankings, but I have a feeling it's about to get knocked heavily off. Jerome, you wanted to talk about Fences next, and that is exactly what's going to happen. So, have at it about Fences. It's one of the only films on this list I've seen a trailer for. I remember seeing a trailer for it a while ago and thinking, Denzel's probably going to get an Oscar nomination. So, this is my de facto number 1, having seen none of them.
So here's the thing about Fences. It is not necessarily a great movie. And I think if you go into this expecting something epic, I don't think you're going to really get that. This really is 2 hours and 20 minutes of just of an August Wilson play being put on film. And Denzel Washington also directed this. Mm-hmm. He is, of course, the star. He owns the rights to all of August Wilson's plays to put on film, and I guess this is going to be the first of a series of films that he's going to be doing in association with the August Wilson library, so to speak. But Denzel Washington and Viola Davis both performed this when it first was on Broadway back in 2010 and 2011. So this film was an opportunity to sort of get those award-winning performances on film, and they're both really, really excellent. I don't know. I think there's a distinct possibility that Denzel Washington is going to win. Viola Davis is a shoo-in to win Best Supporting Actress. These two performances are really excellent, and if you walk into this film with an understanding that you're going to get a great character study, particularly of Denzel Washington, then you're really not going to have your expectations, or keep your expectations low as far as action and stuff like that. You're going to get a lot of really good dialogue. I would argue that the movie is probably a half hour to 45 minutes too long. It's 2 hours and 20 minutes, and it's just dialogue. It can be a real heavy at times. I mean, this is also a very heavy film, and some of the emotions and there's a lot of emotional ups and downs with the characters. But like I said, Denzel Washington and Viola Davis, their performances are second to none, and this film is worth it just to see what these two are doing on the screen. Denzel Washington is someone who I would argue is probably one of our best actors.
Hell yeah.
Ever at this point.
Yeah,
this guy, you look at his body of work. I mean, this is a guy who, he was on a hit television show for 6 years, and then he immediately won an Oscar for Glory, and he's done things like Malcolm X and Philadelphia, The Pelican Brief, Training Day, and so many other films, and almost everything he is in, regardless of how good or bad the movie is, he is good in the movie. I would say even something as mediocre as The Magnificent Seven, which was, again, like I said, mediocre, but Denzel Washington, I think, really elevates anything that he is in. So for that reason alone, I think Fences is worth watching. And like I said, I wouldn't say it's a great movie. I ranked all 9 of these. I put this at number 5. But to me, being able to see Denzel and Viola Davis just go back and forth and the interactions that they have, I would say this is definitely worth watching.
Yeah, for sure. I think Denzel's performance in Training Day is one of my absolute favourite performances ever. Denzel Washington making everything he's in better sounds awfully familiar to me, because I think I saw Mike Thomas say something to that effect, presumably after having watched Fences. So, Mike, what are your thoughts on this film? And also, I just realised I don't actually know what this is about, so why don't you hit me with a one-sentence plot summary of Fences?
Fences is about a married couple in the 1950s, early 60s. They are a working class, at best, family. Denzel Washington is a garbage man. His wife, Viola Davis, seems to be considered, I guess, a homemaker. They have an 18-year-old son who is transitioning into adulthood, obviously. And it's basically about how white supremacy kept this family down, and then it transitions brilliantly into how the patriarchy keeps women down, especially women of color, down in this country. And it's 100% my best movie of the 9 here. It's not even really close when I think back on it. Even it's not to say that other movies on this list aren't great. This is just very distinctly and easily the number 1 film of the 9 nominated for me. Just from there's really 3 things to keep in mind with this film. 1, it has one of those performances from Denzel Washington that reminds you that Denzel Washington is one of the best fucking actors alive. And it's something that we often kind of forget, because Denzel Washington, he commands a high salary and he commands a certain type of role. And I think over the last 10 to 15 years, those roles have not been great acting or avenues for him to be really push himself as an actor to get the attention for the quality of the performance. It's not that I don't like or didn't enjoy films like Man on Fire or John Q or other things like that, but those aren't the films that kind of get those kind of accolades, for better or worse. He's phenomenal in it. The movie kind of just subtly, Viola Davis is not a non-factor, but she's not a huge part of the first maybe half hour, 45 minutes of the movie. And then really she just kind of steals the show right from Denzel Washington in the second half of the film, and delivers once again a complete knockout performance. She's a co-lead in this film. To be clear, she chose to go supporting to give herself a better chance to win. I can't knock her for that, but this is a lead performance for sure.
I didn't know they got really, to choose that.
Yes. I mean, like the studio, like this. It's not that the studio doesn't have say. It's more like they work together. What's the best way to get you nominated?
Okay.
The best example of that is because the Academy has this weird rule where an actor cannot be nominated in the same category twice or more than once in any given year. So the weirdest example of this, or the 2 weirdest that come to mind, is when DiCaprio had Blood Diamond and Departed in 2006. He put Blood Diamond for lead and Departed for supporting actor.
Clever.
So yeah. And then he only got nominated for Blood Diamond. Even weirder, though, was about 3 years later, Kate Winslet was trying to do a thing where she get lead actress for Revolutionary Road and supporting actress for The Reader, and the Academy just said "fuck you" and nominated her for Best Actress for The Reader, and then gave her the award. So it wasn't a massive "fuck you," but it was. It's a very weird and arbitrary rule as far as I'm concerned.
Sorry, I didn't want to derail the discussion with my fundamental misunderstanding of the Oscars, but hey.
No. I think it's just such a fascinating and absurd.
Right. I mean,
it's worth mentioning.
Anthony Hopkins won Best Actor for Silence of the Lambs, and he was in the movie for 15 minutes. Yeah. So,
but anyway, so this film, this film is the first 30, 45 minutes are dominated by Denzel Washington's character, and you see basically how he has been beaten down as a black man in this country, and how he has taken those, I don't know, lessons sounds a bit condescending, but basically taken his experiences and let him inform him on what he needs to do next or what he wants to do. It's revealed he's been having an affair this whole time, that he has a newborn kid on the way, and for him, in his mind, is look at all that I've lost, and this is like kind of not like my reward for it, but like this is something that's for me. I need something for me, given all the missed opportunities I had. He was, the way he talks about it, he was a hot baseball prospect, one of the best players in the Negro Leagues, but by the time Major Leagues was bringing in black people, he was kind of past his prime. He thinks he was never going to have a shot. We find out later he was 40 when that was kind of making that choice, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So there's some conflict there. He's also dealing with the fact that his son, who is 17, 18, depending, look, it sounds like he's probably his junior, senior year of high school. Sounds like he's a star football prospect. He wants to go all in on football. His father, Denzel Washington, based on his poor experiences with baseball and how his country rejected him, is just flat out refusing to allow his son to play football unless he can maintain a steady job at the same time, which is basically impractical for anyone, on top of like your schoolwork and everything. And you see that conflict come there. It's revealed after that about the affair, and that's kind of where the focus of the film shifts to Viola Davis. And you see how, yes, this man has been beaten down, and it's awful, for sure, but then that in turn allows his wife to be held back, because she points out, think of all the things I gave up for you. Think of all the things I never got to join. I never got to take. Think of all the times I wanted something for myself that I didn't have, and all this time you're doing this to me. And it really is... This film, it kind of brilliantly speaks uniquely to the black experience in America, while at the same time showcasing a relationship in a way that I think almost every single relationship can relate to. Like, I think if you're a man who's been in a heterosexual relationship, and you don't feel like a pang of like, fuck, I've done this to my partner over the years or something while you're watching this, like not like literally where you've had fathered another child with another woman, but like where you've put your needs before your partners in a way that was so obviously biased towards you that you thought was you deserved or something at the same time. Like, if you can't relate to that feeling, like, I feel like you're just not even self-aware enough. I completely disagree with the notion that it's in any way overlong. I think this is compelling from the first moments on screen until the credits roll. It's absolutely fantastic. It's not, Denzel Washington as a director kind of, for the most part, kind of kept it simple. And if you're really into visuals and new visuals and scenes and locations changing, maybe that's just not going to be your thing. And that's totally, that's a totally valid way of approaching it. Like, if you're, movies are not books, like there's a visual component to it. And if you're more into the visual component of cinema than say I am, you're probably not going to see this as one of your best films of the year.
You famously are not as into that aspect as we've covered. So
I mean, it's not that I can't be impressed by that. It just doesn't really matter for me compared to story and character and story.
I get you.
And character.
I think we all have our different things
and I don't think
that hook us more with film.
I don't think that means I'm right. I'm saying like this is what it is for me, and this is how I choose. This is the lens I look at films.
No, none of this. We're going to get a definitive list out of this. There's going to be no compromises.
And with that, I mean, to me, it's just this is everything I want from a movie. This is. I think I'm talking myself into even thinking it's even better than my initial reaction was to it.
I'll say the thing with it is, I think I would probably prefer to see it as a play, but obviously I'm never going to get to see Fences starring Denzel Washington like as a play, and it seems like this is a way of, it won't be the same, but kind of giving this to a wider audience, as some films have done before. So I'm interested to check it out and maybe educate myself on theatre a little bit more. I don't know.
Theater.
Sounds dangerous. Yeah, theatre. Yeah.
If it comes down to it, I think you're better off seeing this than not. I mean, and I'm hopeful that, we get more of these types of films from Denzel Washington, because I think it's the only way that he's going to be able to push himself these next few years, because unless you're in a comic book franchise, I think for someone like Denzel, it's going to be really difficult for him to find roles. So I think
the Equalizer 2 is coming. You know it is.
Perhaps maybe the Magnificent Eight.
For sure. I would say it's 2 against 1, but let's bear in mind, heavy asterisk for me, as I've seen none of them and I'm basing it on trailers. Fences is the one that appealed to me the most out of the few that I've heard about, but we all like what we like. Speaking of which, famous racist Mel Gibson has directed another film called Hacksaw Ridge, which, as I understand it, is about a soldier who refused to fight and instead sort of treated his wounded fellow soldiers in battle, played by Andrew Garfield, who I love. No bias there whatsoever. Mike, it is your turn to wax lyrical about a film, and also maybe correct me if I was completely wrong about the premise.
I mean, at this rate, I assume I'm getting La La Land too, because I'm just getting all the stupid fucking films for this year.
No, you are scheduled to get Hidden Figures.
Oh, okay. Yeah, this movie, this is one really, like, jaw-dropping scene or sequence late in the film where this conscientious objector, played by Andrew Garfield, is on top of this ridge, and he just keeps, despite the fact that his unit or his crew, whatever, has abandoned the ridge to attack at another time, he has stayed up there to just rescue as many people as he possibly can and to lower them back down to the ground. That sequence is honestly one of the most compelling individual sequences of any film I've seen this year, but it is surrounded by shit and cliche storytelling, hacky cheeseball acting that, like, I don't even know why they would go in that direction. I mean, like, it's 2017. Have we not made it past this type of level of acting yet? Like, I think Mel Gibson is a
deplorable human being.
As a cinematic mind. Yes, he's deplorable. As a cinematic mind, I think he's fascinating. Like I really enjoyed his takedown of Batman v Superman. Like, I was like, okay, you get storytelling and movie making in a way that's not unique, but, like, at least you just get it on a level that a lot of people don't get it. And I would love to block out everything else that has to do with Mel Gibson and just listen to him talk about movies, because I do think he does have unique and keen insights into the process of storytelling. I mean, this movie is just so shitty 99% of the time. And the heavy-handed religious elements of it are, I mean, that's what floats your boat. It's going to float your boat here. Like, if you like that stuff, you're going to like it here.
There's a lot of conflating of patriotism and religion as well that I think is problematic.
Yes. # problematic, in fact. Like, there isn't a single performance you can point to here to be like, well, at least this person was good. I mean, Vince Vaughn is laughably bad as a drill sergeant, as a on-the-field commander. Sam Worthington's actually not that bad, although I don't think he's nearly as bad as his most high-profile roles have led most to believe. I thought Avatar and
generous.
That Terminator, he's
the Terminator that didn't know he was a Terminator.
Yeah,
I forgot. And he cries when he hears Alice in Chains.
He's much better in here, and he's much better in that movie with, I can't remember, but anyway. He's not that bad here, but really, like, this movie is just a joke. This movie is a punchline. I don't know why anyone would take this seriously. I think I think Hollywood itself has just inflicted with us the redemption narrative so much over the past 100 years that we just want to live them out in real life, and that's what they're trying to do with Mel Gibson here. Like, I don't normally like to speak upon the motivations of people that I do not know or have heard them speak to. I rather just deal with the product at hand, but, like, I'm forced to break my rule here and just be like, yeah, like, this movie fucking sucks. There's no reason that you'd want to shower praise on it unless you just want Mel Gibson to have a comeback, because that's how redemption works. You go from a bad person to a good person. Like, I mean, what the fuck?
Well, he's not going to make Lethal Weapon 5 if we don't, like, coax him back.
I don't know. I think this movie is a complete utter joke. I don't know. Jerome?
I got that sense, yeah. Yeah, Jerome.
So I think we could both agree that this is number 9 of 9 for both of us. I did not like this
movie.
movie.
8. It's 8 for me.
Whoa. You hate La La Land that much?
So, for me, this is number 9, and I don't even know if I feel as strongly. It is definitely not good. Let's not let's not mince words and pretend this is anything but...
Well, Mike is a professional takedown artist, so...
And I can't even come close to taking this movie down as good as he can, but I think there was a really interesting story, because when you get a war movie, you get very, very typical types of storytelling when it comes to war movies, with big battles, redemptive moments, and here you have something where you could tell a potentially unique story of someone who is a pacifist, someone who does not want to kill people, and he, legitimately is he is the first man in American history to receive the Medal of Honor without firing a shot. There is a really good and compelling story to be told about that, and you can do it with nuance, and you can do it with a certain level of respect, but also look at, some of the very real issues that still surround that. There is a conflating of patriotism and religion that I find very disturbing, especially in these times. I think this movie has a number of things going against it. Mel Gibson, as the director, Mel Gibson loves to direct violence, as is obvious by so many of his later movies, including Apocalypto and The Passion of the Christ. There's a lot of violence in this movie, and for a movie about a pacifist, it's pretty interesting to see just how violent this movie gets. And again, for someone who is so religious, some of the violence just seems very cheap and ridiculous. Vince Vaughn was really terrible. I don't know if he was as bad worse in this or True Detective 2 or True Detective.
Fuck you, he's good in it. It may not be great, but he's good in it. Vince
Vaughn is dreadful, and he should never be allowed in a movie again.
How dare you.
So I saw Sam Worthington on screen for the first time. I just started laughing because Sam Worthington is not good. He's okay in this movie. He's actually not that bad, but Sam Worthington is one of those guys that I just see him on the screen, and I have a very hard time taking him seriously. Jay Courtney, who was Kyle Reese in Terminator Genesis, and I bet if I put a gun to your heads, I bet I could tell you a movie and say which one of these two starred in it, and you might not be able to tell which one's which.
Was Jai Courtney RoboCop?
No, he was not. Guy Courtney and Sam Worthington, both a part of the Terminator franchise. So if looking for reasons why that franchise isn't very good, there are two reasons right there. So
they're just searching for a new era Michael Bain, and they just can't find him.
So yes, this movie is not very good, and Andrew Garfield, I have no idea what he's doing. I did not like his portrayal of Spider-Man. I did not like Silence, and I did not like this movie. So
you may not be welcome on this podcast anymore. How dare you not like his portrayal of Spider-Man?
He is.
No, we're not going to get into this.
He's like a child trying to play a big boy. That's what it comes across. He just.
Okay.
There's something about his delivery and his performances that I just don't... I've never been a fan of his, so...
Okay. I have to keep letting you talk, because it's going to be your turn to talk about Hell or High Water in a second, but Mike, can you just say something real quick and positive about Andrew Garfield as Spider-Man? Just real quick, just so I feel better.
He likes banter.
Ah, fuck you. Alright, Jerome, let's talk about Hell or High Water, which is some sort of Western-type thing with Chris Pine in it, and Jeff Bridges, I think, maybe? Who knows?
So, I saw Hell or High Water before I knew it was even nominated. I happened to get a recommendation from another film podcast to check this out, so I did. It's a fairly simple story on the surface. It's basically a divorced father who is played by Chris Pine, and his ex-con older brother, who is played by Ben Foster. They resort to a desperate scheme in order to save their family's ranch in West Texas. Their desperate scheme is basically to rob a series of banks in the state of Texas, particularly a lot of small southern towns, and they basically are robbing these banks to save the ranch. And Jeff Bridges is playing the role of sort of the lead officer who is investigating / chasing the brothers. And it is a very modern Western. It incorporates some very modern ideas, including ideas about gun laws, stand your ground, which is very much a hot topic in the United States. And it is, on the surface, a fairly simple film, but I really, really liked this movie a lot, actually. If I were in my rankings here, I have it as number 3. I really was actually surprised by how much I enjoyed it. I really didn't have a lot of expectations going in. I'm not really a big Western fan, but there's a lot of really interesting story here. I think the performances by nearly all of the actors are very strong, including a very good supporting performance by Gil Birmingham, who plays Alberto Parker, who is Jeff Bridges' partner. He is very good in this. As you would imagine, you sort of get something very close resembling the Big Lebowski's Jeff Bridges in this film. Sort of his behavior, some of his mannerisms, some of his delivery. And, I think regardless of how you feel about some of the Star Trek movies, I think Chris Pine is about as good of a casting choice for Captain Kirk. And I think some people, maybe they see him only in that role and sort of only as that guy, but he is someone who really put his money where his mouth was in helping to produce this film and getting this film put together. And I think he also delivers a very solid performance as well. And Ben Foster, as the ex-con older brother, plays a very good shit disturber. So he is someone who I've really liked in a lot of movies, actually, in supporting roles, and this one is no different. So I really enjoyed this. I thought this was very strong. And if you're somebody who doesn't like Westerns or sort of that storytelling, I would actually give this one a chance because it feels very different, and I think it actually brings some fresh ideas to the table.
I don't know about you, Mike, but he lost me the second he said there's such thing as other film podcasts. That sounds crazy to me. The Real World, everyone.
I don't listen to them.
No, why would you? So tell me about Hell or High Water.
I watched Hell or High Water this morning. It was the last of my catch-up. It's really enjoyable. From one of those films from beginning to end, it's very compelling. There's really only 3 characters in this movie that you get to know very well. All 3 of them are played extraordinarily well by Jeff Bridges, Ben Foster, Chris Pine. I don't think the dude is quite exactly how I would describe Jeff Bridges in this movie, but I guess there's always some semblance of the dude in everything Jeff Bridges does, to a certain degree. Ben Foster plays the crazy psychopath as well as anybody. He's been doing that for over a decade now. I love Ben Foster as a crazy psychopath. If you wanted to cast a short little pissed off crazy person who could conceivably kill 1 million people in 5 minutes, Ben Foster's your guy. Chris Pine, this feels like he's really good in the movie. I like Chris Pine. I kept thinking, man, I almost wish this movie was set 10 years later so they could just cast Timothy Olyphant, because that's clearly who was supposed to be in this role. But they use the real estate crisis, the banking crisis, gun laws as interesting backdrops to add a little texture to what's going on here. There's a lot of nuance with why they're robbing the banks. Like, their mother was being foreclosed on, they're being screwed over by a bank. They're only stealing from the bank and the branches from that bank that is foreclosing on their mother. Like, there's nuance there. There's a huge gaping issue in this film, though, and it gets back again to this redemption narrative, and one of the most insidious redemption narratives from the very beginning of cinema in Hollywood is the white redemption, white savior narrative. And it's done in here in a very unique and almost last second way with the Jeff Bridges character, because he spends the first hour and a half of this hour 50 movie just being a racist asshole to his partner, who is half Indian, half Mexican, and just making all sorts of jokes about that all the time. And it's clear that he's not doing this with the worst of intention. He's not doing this to be a racist asshole. But, one, his partner clearly feels some kind of way about this, and we don't get to know this partner really at all. He's just there, basically, to serve as fodder for the character we're supposed to care about. And, I mean, like, that in itself is pretty archaic as it is. And then at the end, what happens is, as they have a big showdown with Ben Foster basically sacrifices himself so his brother can get away and get the money, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And, of course, the Jeff Bridges' minority partner gets killed in this, and then Jeff Bridges has to avenge him. And I'm just like, what decade is it? What decade is it where this is a story that we need to tell on any level, shape, or form? I mean, and on top of the fact that, they keep making reference to the fact that this land was originally the land of American Indian population and that how it was stolen from them. And I was just like, okay, just like 3 or 4 cameos from American Indian actors, and then this one bit supporting part who doesn't really have much of a role other than to be fodder for our white hero. I'm just like, I can't imagine why this is still happening. I just can't imagine it. It's just so beyond archaic, and it really undermines a lot of the film for me. It's one thing if you want to use a banking crisis as a backdrop for a fun, exciting story, because that's like this film didn't need to be a serious, nuanced takedown of the banking crisis and the role of large banks that play in everyday families. Not at all. But if you using the American Indian population and the absolute oppression that they have suffered at the hands of Americans in this country, and just to use that as a backdrop and use that as a prop and to use them as objects is honestly just unacceptable at this point in time. And it took what should have been a great movie, and if anyone's reaction to this is that I can't stand the movie based on that alone, I wouldn't blame them. It was not such a huge part of the movie that it bothered me. Not that it didn't bother me. It ruined the movie for me, but it definitely forced me to have to take the film down a peg or two. I mean, I just don't. I mean, like seriously, what year is it that we're still doing this? And it's great that Native Indian Americans were actually in the movie and were actually cast in the movie instead of white people playing Indian Americans. But again, that's the lowest bar that we should be able to get over. I think that's such a gaping issue, and any discussion of this movie needs to deal with that in a serious way, as far as I'm concerned.
Hashtag problematic.
Hashtag problematic.
I certainly think this is an issue, and I'm glad you brought it up, because I certainly think that it is an issue. The redemption of a white character is something that we see still all too often, and I certainly see it as an issue. But I really do think that some of the interactions with the brothers as well, I think, I don't want to say it redeems it, but I certainly think that there are elements to this that are also very good as well. And if you're someone who is bothered by the story, what you were bringing up, Mike, then certainly I think your enjoyment is going to be hampered. But I think there is enough fresh, new stuff to take away from this that it's still a movie that I very much enjoy. So, and
yeah, to be clear, I enjoyed it, and I don't think it erases the good that the movie accomplishes. I just think it was just kind of baffling to see it unfold in the way that it unfolded. I expected at least Alberto to be a little bit more of a substantive character, that we can get to know him a little bit more, and we just don't at all. And I don't have a problem with Jeff Bridges being, making racist insult. In theory, that's not a problem. Let's see how these people would behave. And that's a very believable way in which this character would behave. But the way that it's used is incredibly manipulative and objectifying, and it's just hacky.
Hacksaw Ridge. Yeah, I don't know. I can't do this. So that's about our halfway point. So yes, you are listening to the Real World Podcast. Do check out intotherealworld.com for all our plans going forward about what's going to be happening after this very highbrow discussion about quote-unquote real films. But let's carry on. So our next film will be Hidden Figures, and Mike Thomas is responsible for talking this one up. This is something about NASA. That's literally all I know, and Janelle Monáe's in it, who's dope as hell. Yeah,
this is a pretty cool movie with a great story. Basically, black women were a huge part of getting American white men, more particularly, into space in the first place. And that has largely been unknown, at least to people like myself, and I'm guessing the majority of people who watch this film. And we followed these 3 black women who played a large part of NASA at the time when this was happening. We get to know their stories. We see the obvious difficulties and barriers that they face in their office. In NASA, they are the focus of the story. It's despite its serious racist issues that it's exploring, it's done in a fairly breezy, light manner, all things considered. It's an incredibly easy film to watch. I think it's fun for the whole family, so to speak. All the performances are good. We only get minimal white savior moments in the film, but at least one of them leads to Kevin Costner saying, "At NASA, we all pee the same color." Which is quite frankly the greatest moment in cinematic history, clearly.
I have to say, There is nobody else who could have put that line.
He's the only one who could pull it off. That's for sure.
Absolutely.
But it's still, it's still a thing that actually happened. I think this is probably the feel-good movie of the year in a lot of ways. If it wins, I won't complain. I don't think it reaches the level of Fences or of Moonlight or probably Manchester by the Sea either, but it's super compelling.
It's that one hearing from you is, it sounds like your feelings here, you may not be meaning for it to come across this way, it sounds like you think it's good, not great.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Very okay, as we would say.
In case the audience is wondering, Matt just got tired of hearing me talk and just decided to sum it all up.
I've been tired of you for many episodes now, but we keep going together like a curmudgeonly old couple, so...
Yes. But yeah, I enjoyed this one quite a bit. It's a good movie, told for the right reasons.
Okay. Someone I'm not tired of hearing from, Jerome Cusson. Tell me about Hidden Figures.
So I really like this movie. This would probably be number 2 for me. Very strong. I really like the opening scene because the opening scene is where the 3 women are driving on their way to the NASA office and they get stopped by a police officer. And I think it set the tone in a really great way. The way that it was handled doesn't necessarily go in a direction that you would expect because at first the police officer is being very accusatory and then eventually he is giving them an escort to NASA because the police officer, I believe he makes reference to some of the astronauts. So it's got a really great opening scene. I think it handles the process of sort of putting this all together very well. I also really like that because a lot of times when you get a movie like this, you get a movie basically about one person kind of doing all the work. And in this case, you really do have all 3 of these women, plus a whole lot more people, really doing a great job and, putting a man in space. So I think that it was really great casting. I think Taraji P. Henson not being nominated was absurd, given some of the people who were nominated for Best Actress. Octavia Spencer is great. Janelle Monáe has a tremendous scene in the courtroom because there's a point when she is trying to get take night classes, and she has a really good scene where she persuades the judge to let her take those classes. Kirsten Dunst sort of has a small role, but I really like what she was asked to portray, sort of representing the institutional racism that exists in all spaces, and I think Kirsten Dunst did a really good job of that. And Kevin Costner, really the only person who could have played this role because he has to do some absurd things in this. He literally takes a sledgehammer at one point, just before he says the line about we all pee the same color. He literally takes a sledgehammer and knocks down the colored bathroom sign. And there is only one person who could have pulled that off, and his name is Kevin Costner. So he does a very good job in this film as well. It's funny to think that we're going to be talking about Moonlight a little bit later, but Mahershala Ali really does not have a lot to do in this, but it's almost good that he doesn't because, again, what he represents, I like that sort of his character is portrayed in that, he thinks one thing about these women when in reality, it's Taraji P. Henson, it's Octavia Spencer, it's Janelle Monáe's character. They're the ones that really help the space program, and it is amazing to see a story like this represented on film because even in the year 2017, you really don't see this. And it is worth pointing out that of the 9 of Best Picture nominees, this is the movie that has made the most money domestically. So also makes me very, very happy as well. So yes, this is tremendous. And if this won, I also would have no complaints. Yeah, I really enjoyed this from beginning to end.
Wow.
Also a great score as well. If you have a chance to listen to some of the music, a lot of the music is actually originally created. If you listen to the music, it sounds like it was actually done in the 60s, or I'm sorry, the 40s and 50s, but it's all original music. So very good score as well.
I think Janelle Monáe is on the soundtrack somewhere as well. I don't know. There you go. Smash racism with a sledgehammer is what I'm hearing. So a good way to go about it. So we are about to talk about... I'm guessing this is going to be quite a lengthy discussion because we're going to talk about La La Land, which is the darling of award season, nominated for everything imaginable. As far as I know, people think that Ryan Gosling and Emma Stone look pretty next to each other, and they put them in a musical that is from the dude that did Whiplash, which is an amazing fucking film. I've heard extremes in both directions about this film. I've heard people absolutely tearing it apart, and I've heard people say it's wonderful. Jerome, you get La La Land, I'm afraid. So lead us off.
I know how Mike feels about this film. I know what he's going to say. So I'm not going to take very long. All I'm going to say is this is number 8 for me, but I don't think it's nearly as bad as some people have made it out to be. It is by no means Best Picture. It by no means should have been nominated. I think if this had come out in the summer of 2016 as like a breezy summer nostalgia movie, I think it works on that level. But when you put the weight of expectations of this is going to be the Best Picture of 2016, then it really just falls apart. It's a relatively simple story of a romance, but I think it has so many problems. Emma Stone and Ryan Gosling really can't sing or dance. That is problems number 1 and 2. I think you have a lot of very problematic elements. I think there are times when it seems to forget that it's a musical. I don't think the story really adds up in the end. And I really don't think the performances are that great. I think Emma Stone is really given nothing to do in this. And Emma Stone does a great job of adding pathos and nuance to a role that really doesn't have any. And I don't think Damien Chazelle is really interested in writing female characters based on what I've seen from this movie and from Whiplash. I think the idea of this being nominated for 14 awards is absurd. I really don't even think the music is that great, and even some of the songs are that great. I mean, I was even looking at the best song list, and honestly, I think some of the songs from Moana were much better than this. So I don't even know if it's the best musical of the year. So, La La Land, I am not a fan. And now I'm going to turn things over to Mike, because I know Mike is just going to obliterate this. So go for it, Mike.
Mount Vesuvius over here. Let's do this. This is where he just goes, it's okay.
I don't understand the appreciation for this film on any level whatsoever. It's a musical with mediocre music. It's a musical with mediocre dancing. It's impressive that Ryan Gosling and his talents are not limited to staring broodingly. It's nice that he can sing a little bit. It's nice that he can dance a little bit, but he's not exceptional at either one. Emma Stone is slightly better at each of those, but also not exceptional at either one. The story is beyond cliche and trite. A struggling actress trying to make it in Hollywood. A guy who he's just so romantic because of how he thinks about the past and how the past is just so important, and people just don't appreciate the past anymore. I mean, I don't know why anyone would think Ryan Gosling telling people about jazz for 2 hours is something that anyone needs to make a movie about, but apparently they did, and they spent a lot of money on it, and everyone likes it. This is just baffling to me. It's so ridiculous that this is a movie that's going to be remembered for years as, wow, look at all the Oscars this movie won. Look how that's just obviously not every movie that wins Best Picture is remembered fondly as a result. That's kind of happened almost countless times, it seems, in the last 10 years or so, and it can almost be the kiss of death for a movie based on, as we talked about, the weight of expectations. But this really deserves none of the praise it's been getting. Now, I'll say this. Almost any musical is not going to be for me. I think the margin of error for a musical with whether or not it's good or not is just infinitesimally small. But even if you like musicals, I don't really understand, just from an objective standpoint, what about this one makes you so excited? What about this one makes you so happy? What makes you think this one needs to be showered with praise in any way? It's so ordinary in just about every single way. I thought they actually ended on a killer sequence. You think for a moment that maybe Ryan Gosling and Emma Stone, their whirlwind romance ends with them finally getting back together, and they live their life together, and it's revealed that they obviously didn't do that, and that's actually done very well. I mean, not as well as something like 25th Hour, which did the same thing, obviously, to a much more powerful and obviously more nuanced way. But that the tragedy of the different directions one could take in life, and the path not taken or the path chosen not to take. I would say it's shooting fish in a barrel, but it's it's almost cliche for a reason, because it's powerful. Like it's haunting for almost, I think, any adult to think back on the choices one's made and one hasn't made. But other than that, this movie's relatively worthless as far as I'm concerned. I fully expect it to win Best Picture, and I fully expect to shrug and never think about it ever again after that.
Little known fact, Matt Waters, quiet musical fan. Jerome, why do we think La La Land has gotten as much praise and attention as it has? Is it purely down to, people enjoy Ryan Gosling and Emma Stone in films, and it's like happy? And
I think this is it's quote unquote happy. It's really not a happy film. I don't know why it keeps getting slapped at that, because it really doesn't have a happy ending necessarily. But one of the things that Hollywood loves to do is it loves to congratulate itself and talk about wonders of art and how great art is and how great the movie business is and how great actors are. So that's why The Artist wins. That's why Birdman wins. And that's why, some of the movies that also came out that year don't win. It's because Hollywood really loves to congratulate itself and talk about the greatness of itself. So it's a very insular movie for that reason. It takes place in a very idealized version of Los Angeles. I think that's one of the other things that is so surprising to me, is that Damien Chazelle comes off of this movie Whiplash, and he decides to make this musical, and it was really surprising to me that he went from Whiplash to this. Even though the only two things these have in common is you have a brooding male character and music, but it's just very disappointing to see somebody who obviously does have a lot of talent get showered with praise for something that is so painfully mediocre, when I think there are other directors, particularly in this category and even in some of the other categories and some of the other films, that deserve far more praise. We're going to be talking a lot about a couple of the directors in just a few minutes for some of the other films, and I think that the directing jobs that are done in some of those movies are a million times better than what Damien Chazelle does. I don't think Damien Chazelle, quite honestly, I don't think he should have even been nominated, anywhere close to being nominated, because I don't think this is a very good directing job. And he is the director, he is the writer, so I think a lot of the problems with this movie fall upon him. I don't think it falls upon Gosling and Stone. I think those two are they're really doing the best that they can with kind of the hand that they were dealt. But I think if we're looking at this, I think Hollywood really wanted to crown Damien Chazelle as kind of the next director. I think that's another contributing factor. You have this movie that, on the surface, seems to praise the idea of Hollywood and Los Angeles. You have two very pretty white actors dancing,
yes.
And it harkens back to a time of musicals, and that's obviously something that goes back to old Hollywood and sort of the golden age. So for all those reasons, that's why La La Land is probably going to win anywhere between 7 and 12 Oscars.
I actually heard Chazelle had been trying to make La La Land before Whiplash, which he also had to make as a short film to get made as a main film anyway. But yeah, this has been his sort of passion project for a long time, because he grew up watching a lot of that sort of stuff, which is kind of disappointing to hear that this guy that created this, like, Whiplash is one of my favourite films in years, and to hear that that was sort of secondary to this, and this isn't that good is quite disappointing for me. But hey ho, I think we need to call it there for the La La Land discussion for now. Lion is next, and Mike, that's for you to talk about. This one is the real sort of enigma for me. I know almost nothing about Lion whatsoever.
So Lion is about a boy in India, as I pray to myself that I'm not accidentally racist and got the country wrong, who accidentally gets abandoned on a train at 5, 6, 7 years old, ends up hundreds of miles away, having no idea where he is, how to get home, has no relevant information that he can give to anyone to get home. And that's like the first 45 minutes or so of the movie. He's adopted by a family in Australia. We get a quick montage of what that's like, and then we jump to him being, a college student, a post-college student, that time period of his life, where he is now, speaks with a full Australian accent, clearly, is probably far more Australian than Indian at this point in his life, obviously. And it's about him dealing with his struggle of not knowing where, or not, it's not that he doesn't know where he's from, but, you know, not being able to get back home. He's haunted by the idea that his older brother, who is supposed to be looking out for him in that day, and his mother are still looking for him. He's haunted by the fact that he'll never know what it's like to be back there. And we see his journey there. And it's based on what I had no idea, but was a very well publicized real life story that for the most part seems to be accurately retold in this adaptation for the most part. This was surprisingly very powerful for me. The story sounds very cliche. It sounds like something that was revving up to be hashtag very problematic on the surface. I think it mostly escapes that by focusing on this boy the entire time. 10 years ago, you could have very easily seen this film told from the perspective of the family that adopted him in Australia. But instead, they wisely choose to focus just on this boy. It features a shockingly great turn from Dev Patel, who I've always found a bit underwhelming as an actor in terms of, like, at least with drama. He seems like a very light performer, all things considered. He adapts a brilliant Australian accent, and while I'm not a master of that, I did live in Australia for a year, so I have some frame of reference for that, saying that, or making that claim, I should say. He delivers that haunting quarter-life crisis that's going on at the same time as he's dealing with all this kind of brilliantly. He's really just wonderful in the role, and that, I think, if the first 45 minutes loses you at any point, he sucks you right back in, and you want to see his journey conclude in one way or another. Like, you're drawn in by him so much, and I wouldn't say so much of a cliche story. It's almost like one of those too good to be true stories. Wouldn't be a serious contender for Best Picture for me, but it's a nice little story with some great acting mixed in, and as for that, you can do a whole lot worse, as we pointed out, with your Best Picture nominees.
Yeah. I wondered if it would come up, the fact that you lived in Australia for a while. I was going to throw that out there in response.
And obviously Nicole Kidman and David Wenham are actually Australian, so I'll preface what I'm about to say with that. But, like, they are every middle-aged, middle-class Western Australia couple that I've ever met. So that was kind of fun for me. But just like, and obviously they are Australian, but, like, yeah, I don't know.
Very authentic.
That was great. Yes.
Very authentic. Hashtag authentic. Speaking of authentic, Jerome Cusson doesn't get more authentic than Jerome Cusson. What did you like, Lion, having not lived in Australia?
So the one thing I'll say is, if this had not been nominated for... This is actually nominated for 6 Academy Awards, not just Best Picture, but Nicole Kidman and Dev Patel also scored nominations as well. I'm really glad that I got to see this, because otherwise I probably would not. This would have very easily been forgotten. So, at the beginning of the podcast, we talked about the opportunity to see movies that maybe you otherwise would not have. And so I'm really glad that I got to see this, because even though I would not classify this as one of the best pictures of 2017, I very much enjoyed this. I really liked the first 45 minutes of this. I really liked the second half, basically the hour and 15 minutes. I kind of wish that we had gotten more from each, I guess. It feels like the first 45 minutes, I would argue, were actually the more compelling parts, just because you have this little boy. It's basically all pathos, and you've got this little boy trying to go home. Basically, he's on a train for most of it. There's very little dialogue. There's a pretty dramatic scene that I don't even want to spoil, that Mike probably knows what I'm talking about, that you're not quite sure what's going on with this woman that finds him, but very quickly it is revealed that something very bad is going to happen to this young boy if he doesn't get out of there. And I think that is handled incredibly well, and I would argue that's one of the best scenes in the whole movie. I really like what Dev Patel was doing in the second part. I certainly think a nomination was warranted. Nicole Kidman and Rooney Mara are not even characters in this movie, basically. I think they do a good job for, what they are asked to do, but, this really is mostly a character study, and I think it's at times to the detriment. There is another adopted brother whose story is alluded to, that this brother who is also adopted, is not adjusting nearly as well as Dave Patel's character. And, you know, I really wish that we had gotten a little bit more of that to contrast sort of the differences. And, you know, I think that's something that obviously could have been addressed in a longer movie. So I think it was very enjoyable. I certainly think that there were elements, particularly in the second half, you know, some of the characters were not as well developed as I would have liked, certainly. But I think the ending of the film, I think, is very, very powerful, and I think it's incredibly well done. And I could tell you, you know, I did see this in theaters, and very few dry eyes in the house when that came up. So it was very effective and very earned, I would argue, as well. You know, this was, it was to an extent emotionally manipulative, but I really think they earned it with, you know, some of the quality of the performances. And I think the fact that it's a true story obviously helps. And what was really cool to me is that after the film was over, that they actually showed the real life people. And that's actually something that I've seen in a number of films lately is showing footage of the real life people. There was another movie that I watched recently.
Hacksaw Ridge. Hacksaw Ridge.
Hacksaw Ridge did that. Patriots Day also did that. So I kind of like that. I think it kind of, I don't know. It's tough for me to put into words, but I like that they do that because I think it sort of makes everything more connective and real. And yeah, I thought Lion was really solid as sort of a fringe Best Picture contender.
Jerome, could you just real quick for me spell out Mr. Patel's first name?
I cannot.
You can't. Okay, it's D-E-V. I mean, could you say that for me?
Is it Dev Patel?
It's Dev Patel. You said it 3 times. I was like, I must have misheard. But
Dev Patel. I'm a terrible person, guys. I am a crazy racist.
Well, I mean, that's what I'm hearing. Speaking of racism, Mike, you being in Australia as an American for a year, was it?
Yes.
Yes. What was the most uncomfortable I'm American in a land of people that don't like Americans experience for you? Or did you not get any of that? Were they very welcoming?
A lot of them assumed I was Canadian.
Okay, yeah, you want to lean into that, I would imagine.
Yeah, I would say the funniest moment was, you know, there's some culinary differences between the two countries, and I was explaining, you know, how peanut butter and jelly is like one of the most common lunch meals for any child in America. And my coworkers at this after-school care that I was working at were just completely baffled by this concept and looking at me as if I was insane. And that's because in Australia, jelly is Jell-O.
Yes.
So they were... Here. Yes, I assumed it's a Commonwealth thing.
Yeah.
Hashtag Commonwealth. So they were picturing me going on for about 10 minutes or so about how peanut butter and Jell-O is the most delicious sandwich in the world.
You are talking about jam, my friend.
Yes, but yeah, that was great. That was a good little moment.
Yeah, did you avoid talking about Fosters? They don't like it when you assume they drink Fosters.
No.
Okay.
I never talked about Fosters.
Okay. Well, Australia banter achieved. Jerome, that's given you a quick moment to compose yourself, because you're going to talk to me about Manchester by the Sea, starring Affleck the Better, I believe. Casey Affleck. In terms of acting.
Yes.
In terms of acting.
In terms of sexual harassment, at the very least.
Whoa. He's a man on a boat, I think, and he has to take care of his nephew? I don't know.
So yes, Casey Affleck plays an uncle who is asked to take care of his teenage nephew after the boy's father. The boy's father is played by the always great Kyle Chandler.
Fuck yeah, Coach Taylor.
Kyle Chandler is pretty much great in everything he does. Michelle Williams, also pretty much great in everything she does. And this movie is really, really tremendous, I would say. This is probably my favorite Casey Affleck performance ever. It's a pretty simple story, but it pulls on a number of different threads. There are some incredibly compelling scenes, and I think one of the things, if you're somebody who likes, who really is a firm believer in the idea of show, don't tell, then this might not be the movie for you, because there is a lot of telling in this movie, and some of the bigger scenes that you might think should be in the film are not necessarily in the film. For example, one of the major, the biggest plot point of this movie, I would argue, is towards the middle, when it is revealed that Casey Affleck's character gets drunk, decides to leave the house to go get more beer, I believe, and he leaves the fireplace open so that a log that is on fire basically rolls out, sets the whole house on fire. It kills his kids. His wife is able to get out, and basically this is sort of the central point for this, the dissolution of the marriage, and also brings up a number of other issues. But you don't actually see the fire. You see sort of the aftermath take place, and you really don't see the dissolution of Casey Affleck and Michelle Williams' marriage, but you sort of see the aftermath, and a very powerful scene that takes place towards the end where Michelle Williams apologizes for some of the things that she'd said to his character, which we don't actually hear, but you can sort of surmise and understand, just how deeply that incident really hurt the entire family. And this is probably one of the smaller insular stories of any of the 9 films, because it's essentially about one family. But in a way, I think it's one of the more compelling stories, because I think what this film does so well is that it focuses on this one character, but you're able to get sort of an idea of so many of the other characters as well. And I would say that this is one of the best directed movies of the year, because Kenneth, I believe it's either Lonergan or I'm not quite sure how to pronounce this. Kenneth Lonergan, we'll just go with that. I think he does a really good job of shooting this movie and of using flashbacks in a way that doesn't feel trite, because I think it's become a trick used by a lot of filmmakers and TV shows to the detriment. But I think he uses flashbacks incredibly well to help enhance the story. And this is one of the more depressing movies of the year as well. It's a very heavy watch, I would say, but definitely I can absolutely see why this was nominated, and it certainly deserves to be.
Fair. Mike Thomas, why is it called Manchester by the Sea?
That's the name of the town that some of this film happens in.
Ah.
Yes.
Okay. I take it this is American Manchester, not my Manchester.
No. This film is good. The acting is great. Kyle Chandler is, in fact, wonderful. Casey Affleck, though, was better in The Assassination of Jesse James by the coward Robert Ford, but...
Say that 3 times fast.
Yeah, we'll let that go for now. This film is both incredibly small in its scope, but like a number of films I felt this year, it relied very heavily on melodrama in a way that only worked because of how small they play every other scene in the film. But I like, this story is really about grief and the way grief is handled in a lot of ways. It's also about toxic hypermasculinity and how it prevents men from dealing with their emotions, dealing with their grief in a healthy, constructive ways. And all those ideas are really important, but the melodrama felt a little out of place, all things considered, or I guess I should say not out of place so much as in the film could have been so much more if it was handled in a less melodramatic way, like he burns his kids alive is essentially what happens by accident, but that's like what happens in the movie. Or at least that's what happens in this story. And I kind of felt like it was a huge stomach punch when it happened. Like, it was late at night when I was watching this. I could barely sleep afterwards. I was like, holy fuck and shit. Like, it was powerful. But in a way that I think it felt like a shortcut in a way to make us care when it didn't really need to be that large of a moment. But other than that, like, this is... Well, I mean, depressing is probably a good word for it, accurate word for it. I think it's very compelling and entertaining all the way through. There's lots of great performances. There's good comic relief. The core of the story is Casey Affleck bonding with his nephew, played by Lucas Hedges, who is absolutely every awkward high school guy ever. At least that's what it feels like. He totally captures what it's like to be a high schooler, both in the good and the bad. And like, that relationship is wonderful. The acting is wonderful. Kyle Chandler is wonderful. Michelle Williams is wonderful. Comparing her performance to Viola Davis' performance, you can't. That's what the absurdity of these categories at times is just too much. She has 3 scenes. Viola Davis is the lead of the movie. Anyway, I don't think this movie I wouldn't really seriously consider it for the best of this bunch, but it's really good. It's really entertaining. It's very much worth seeing. I would have gone in slightly different directions, but that's just my taste. I don't like big melodramatic plot points in films.
This sounds like the kind of thing. It sounds like a very somber film. It sounds like something that I would have to kind of get myself in the right frame of mind to watch. The kind of thing I would have on my queue or in a stack of DVDs and be like, I'll get to it.
This is your Netflix my list in perpetuity kind of film. Yeah. You're never going to be excited to watch this film.
Okay.
But the acting is really good in it. And there's definitely moments of comic relief, for sure.
I'm surprised to hear that, actually.
Almost all from the nephew. I mean, their interactions, and I think it's designed specifically to have a lot of comedic elements to it.
Because really what the impetus for almost everything that we see in the present is that Kyle Chandler, who is Casey Affleck's older brother and the father of the nephew, obviously, finally succumbs to heart disease and passes away. And we only see him through flashbacks, so that's like what is why Casey Affleck and the nephew are together the whole time in the movie. And while that is very depressing, it's handled, that part of it is handled very, very well, and not at all in a melodramatic way. Gretchen Mol also gives a really great performance.
Gretchen Mol.
Yes. Boardwalk Empire. Matthew Broderick is great in his 5-minute scene.
Whoa, there's a lot of people in this thing.
Yeah. Everyone's good in it. There's a lot of great acting, like I said, but I would prefer a slightly less melodramatic twist from that halfway point.
Okay. Jerome, where did you have this on your list of 9? I don't know if you said, but...
I had it as number 4.
Number 4, okay. That sounds about right from what I'm hearing.
Yeah, that sounds... 4 or 5 is probably where I had it, but I was a bit lower on some other films.
Okay. Well, this brings us to our final film, Moonlight, which I had not heard of, and then I watched the Hollywood Reporter. They do these roundtables, and I am, for some reason, addicted to them, and I would just sit and watch hours of these things. And the director was on there alongside problematic Mel Gibson and Damien Chazelle and various others. And him talking about his film, it sounded incredibly interesting, and that is Moonlight. And by process of elimination, this is Mike's to take us home with, and Jerome will obviously get the rebuttal. But Mike, talk to me about Moonlight.
Moonlight's my clear number 2 film of the year after Fences. It once again deals with what I think is probably one of the most important issues in the world, which is toxic hypermasculinity and its impact on society and people in general. It tells the story in 3 parts of a young boy growing up in a poor community in Miami. We see his young childhood, and that's like the first 40 minutes. We see about a period of his life during his teenage years, and then we see him as an adult. We come to learn that this young boy is gay, and growing up gay in the Black community can be very hard for a lot of people. As someone who works in Newark, New Jersey, which is a teacher in Newark, New Jersey, I confront the issue of hypermasculinity, quite frankly, every single day.
Yeah, I'll bet.
I don't say that in a judgmental way. I think it's put upon our young men in Newark, New Jersey, in a way that's just crippling and unfair to them. But that pressure that is put onto them is very real, and the impact on them and the way it cripples them emotionally is also very, very unfortunately quite real. So this young boy who is dealing with a substance addicted mother at home who hates it or who belittles him for being gay, and while again you wouldn't want, I would fear that the impression white audiences would take from this film is that this is the Black experience and every single Black experience. I would really hope that they wouldn't take that away from this film, but this experience does speak, quite frankly, to a lot of students that I've had in my time in Newark. So for me, perhaps it resonated for me in a way that maybe it wouldn't necessarily for other people, but that doesn't sound like it's even the case. And when I say other people, I mean like anyone. It just felt this is a struggle that a lot of young men are going through. And it's not necessarily that they're all gay, but that pressure to be this dominant male at all times is just too much unfair for anyone. And it basically leads to this wonderful examination of black masculinity. It's incredibly powerful. We see him as a young boy. He's more or less adopted by Marshala Ali, formerly, who had a far more complicated first name that I definitely can't pronounce. But I've been a fan of his all the way back to that really cheesy sci-fi or maybe USA show, The 4400. So I've been waiting for like a decade for him to break out. And then he does this, the Hidden Figures, and Luke Cage all in the span of like 6 months. And so now he's a bona fide star like that. Wonderful stuff.
And don't forget House of Cards.
There you go. That show exists and people watch it, theoretically.
I mean, he was out there before he was on any of the others, so I could certainly make the argument that.
But does that show exist, Jerome? Or is it just something that people...
I mean, look, I'm not
Forest, etc., etc., etc.
arguing that it's good.
Tree, Forest, etc., etc. And, Marshala Ali is playing a local drug dealer, and he's kind of this oddly stabilizing influence in this young boy's life. It's revealed that he's actually dealing to the young boy's mother, which it's not clear to me on first watch whether he knew that originally or not, but regardless, it's revealed to the audience, or the dots finally connect to him, for him on that at some point in the first part of the film. His living girlfriend, or his wife, I can't remember, is actually played by Janelle Monáe, so 2 big films for her and Marshala Ali in the past 3 months. Good for them. And basically, it's him who just kind of tells them that, like, because the young boy asks him, "Am I a faggot?" And the guy basically, Marshala Ali, kind of informs him why that word is used and the negativity with that word, but that there's nothing wrong with being gay. We cut to the middle. Marshala Ali has been dead in the meantime, and we're now seeing this young boy as a teenager. He has his first and what is we revealed to be his only romantic physical experience ever with another young boy, but he's obviously dealing with a lot of torment, as almost any high schooler can relate to, but particularly gay people of color can relate to, and it leads to him actually attacking one of his tormentors with a chair. We know he's arrested from that point. He refuses to speak as to why he did it. That's also a very common thing. And then we see him as an adult, and we see him wearing this mask of masculinity. We see him; he is now a drug dealer himself, and we see him performing this idea, this awful, toxic idea of what masculinity is meant to be. And we see this impact that it's had on him, and it's just absolutely fucking tragic and brutal to watch. This is probably one of the most powerful films we'll see today. It's right up there with Fences for me. Fences just connected with me in a slightly bigger way for whatever reason. But, if I were to recommend 2 films for everyone to see this year, 100% it'd be Fences, and then it would also be Moonlight. This film is everything that a movie should try to be. It's saying something powerful. It is pointing out oppression. It is pointing out important issues. It is acted beautifully. It is shot beautifully. Everything about this is great.
Quite the endorsement. Jerome, you didn't put Fences at number 1. Does that mean that you did put Moonlight at number 1?
Moonlight is number 1 with a bullet for me. I think it's the best fictional film of 2016. It's amazing to look at Barry Jenkins, who is the director of this film. The last movie he made was Medicine for Melancholy. That movie came out in 2008. This is his second movie.
Yeah. I was looking at all the sort of the previous work of everyone, all the directors and writers involved in these films, and seeing his experience is predominantly short films, and then this one film, Medicine for Melancholy. It's kind of crazy that.
So what I'm hoping is that because the Academy is looking to diversify so desperately, I really hope that it's not another 8 years before we see Barry Jenkins make another film, because it is incredibly obvious that he has the chops to create some very powerful narratives that can cover issues of race and sexuality, and these are 2 issues that when it comes to America, I mean, these are 2 of the most important issues that we have in this country and will continue to be for years to come. And, what Michael says, it's really hard to follow that up. But, I think that when the movie Boyhood came out in 2014, one of the big complaints was that, you had this experience of this this white boy being raised up over 18 years. And, I think a lot of people appreciated the ambition of Richard Linklater and what he was able to do in that. But I think there was a lot of discussion about, what about these other experiences from non-white people? And then, you had the movie Inside Out, which I would argue is similar in many ways to Boyhood. Obviously, it's a Pixar movie, so it's, not delving as seriously into certain issues. But I would say that it is a very good discussion of emotions and, how a young woman is raised in America and how that goes. And I think Moonlight is an even more nuanced and compelling version of Boyhood, because I think it is much more focused. It has a laser focus, unlike Boyhood, because it is clearly focusing on this issue of hyper-masculinity and what it means to be a black man in America, especially in an urbanized setting, which this is. And, I think it has a lot of echoes of a movie like Boyhood. I think it has a lot of echoes like a show like The Wire. And I think for all those reasons, I think this to me should be what the Academy wants as its best picture. It's got, in so many ways, I think it's a far better representation of what the Academy should want, because it's something that feels different. It feels fresh. It's creative. It does have a very clear 3-act structure, but, it's not a movie that relies on a lot of big names. It doesn't have a big budget. It doesn't have special effects, but, this is as pure a narrative movie as you're going to find, but also something that has a lot to say about a lot of very important issues in this country. The fact that it's not the front runner, it really is annoying to me. And, maybe, yes, the Oscars, of course, really don't mean anything in the grand scheme of things, but to me, this is the very kind of movie that should be celebrated and should be seen by a wide audience. And it's very unfortunate to me that it has only made $20 million up to this point. So I would agree with Mike. I would say, but I would actually go a little bit further and say if you're going to see one movie off of this list, then this should be the one, because for me this is the best fiction film of 2016.
You talked about how hopefully it's not 8 years before Barry Jenkins makes another film, and how he's on the cusp of something here. A good friend of mine who was giving me some prep for this, his pro tips to sum up the Oscars, he told me La La Land is racist, Mel Gibson is racist, yay for diversity of the nominations, and he suggested that Moonlight is potentially this year's Whiplash. And obviously those films are not all that similar in terms of content, but Mike, do you think maybe this will be for Barry Jenkins what Whiplash was for Damien Chazelle, and his next film will get infinite nominations and whatnot, and like this, people will talk about this after the fact more than they're talking about it now?
Possibly. I mean, Mahershala Ali is likely to win Best Supporting Actor at this point, so maybe that comparison does work on a broad level. Yeah, I don't expect this movie to clean up in any way at the Oscars. I think Ali will be the biggest win for them. It might be the only win. But, yeah, I could see that happening. I mean, Barry Jenkins clearly has a great voice, has a great sense of what a movie should look like, and I can't wait to see what he does next. Yeah,
I hear parts of this are sort of semi-autobiographical. It's merged with a play. Terrell Alvin McCraney wrote a play in Moonlight, Black Boys Look Blue, and they sort of merged both of their childhood experiences and created this. So it sounds incredibly interesting, if nothing else. And when I saw Barry Jenkins talking about it, he said there was sort of a challenge of when you kind of change your lead after people get invested in them for half an hour, 40 minutes, it can be like, oh no, I've got someone new now. But he believed that they found 3 actors that you could get equally invested in. So I think it sounds very interesting. It's one that I had not really heard about until all of this. So I guess the Oscars are doing their job and making me pay attention to films I wouldn't have otherwise. So there you have it. That is 9 films nominated for the Best Picture. Having heard all the arguments, I must say Fences still sounds like the most appealing one to me. Maybe that is just because I saw that trailer and I love Denzel Washington, but I don't know. A lot of these sound like okay, some of them sound quite bad. Of the ones that sound like they're good, that sounds more up my alley. So I am going to rule in favour of Fences as the official host. So well done, Mike. You won the game. You win my respect.
I knew I'd be victorious.
Yeah, I figured you would know that.
I knew.
I mean, Matt's a little biased, but that's okay.
I mean, we said hashtag Commonwealth in perfect synchronicity. That you can't buy that chemistry, Jerome.
No, you really can't.
So there's 9 pictures nominated. Some people very bent out of shape about why not just do 10 or why not drop it down to 8. For just the sake of laughs as we wind this down, Jerome, I'll ask you first. If you were to put a 10th film on here, what would you go for?
Oh God!
I know, I'm really putting you on the spot.
It's really difficult for me to say. If I were to put a 10th film, it would probably be 20th Century Women. That's the first one that comes to mind. That would probably, because I'm kind of stalling for time here, thinking about if any of the other films that I saw.
Is Jackie good?
Jackie, I did not think Jackie was that great at all.
Okay.
Actually, so 20th Century Women. If we're just talking fictional films, that would probably be my selection.
Okay. Mike, is there anything that comes to mind for you that you would put in that 10th slot?
Yes, I win again. The answer is very clearly The Lobster, which is the best film of the year.
Yeah, I've seen The Lobster. The Lobster's a very good film.
Yeah,
to me, it came out more than a year ago, but I guess that can't be
It
true.
did, but it's about when it comes out in Los Angeles and New York, because America is the center of the world.
Of course.
That's how.
Theme of the entire awards.
It's got to come out in Los Angeles or New York between January 1st and December 31st of any given year to be considered for that.
Gotcha. That's a very neat bow we've tied on that. We've come back around how it all revolves around Los Angeles.
Yes.
That wasn't as much of a train wreck as I thought. I thought, we got 9 films and two opinions, and I haven't seen anything. But hey, well done. Well done, everyone who got through this and who participated. Thank you very much, Jerome, I will say, for stepping up and watching films while I don't.
And for pitching this podcast episode in general.
Yeah, it's hard to pry us away from films about people in spandex, but it can be done.
Guys, you can wait a week to review Lego Batman. It's still going to be there. You'll still have a chance to review it. And you'll still have a chance to postpone watching Batman the Animated Series.
Hey, it's happening. I guarantee Mike hasn't watched one episode yet.
See. I have not watched an episode yet. I'd also like to congratulate us. We are 3 white people who have talked about how 3 films about black people captured the black experiences. I think we are...
I didn't say shit. Fuck you.
Quite frankly, I think we are the authorities on the matter.
Which one of us is the whitest? It's probably me, isn't it?
I don't know. We're all pretty white.
I mean, you're from Jersey. Jerome's from the Chicago area. Yeah, I'm from Cambridge. It's pretty white.
I mean, we like the movies and we're not making racist comments, so I guess that's...
Well done, us.
We may not have been racist.
Hashtag problematic. The end of this podcast. So, as I made allusions to, we normally kind of delve more into the superhero end of things. We will be back to your regularly scheduled programming as the Tape Crusaders winds down. Lego Batman, full steam ahead for that. I will have seen that by the time this airs, hopefully. I mean, that if this ever airs, Mike has to change the Sean Connery picture, or I'm not putting it up. That's not a joke. And then after that, it will be Batman the Animated Series. We are taking 15 of the very best episodes of that and then talking about that wonderful project to end the Tape Crusaders. If you would like to see a list of the episodes that we've chosen, go to entertherealworld.com, and I wrote an article called Whatever Will Happen to the Tape Crusaders, which lays out all our plans. SoundCloud.com/Mike and Matt, The Real World on pretty much everything else. Yeah, so... And after that, we're going to have to, get away from X-Men or Batman. Except, Logan, and Legion, and I guess stuff like that. But at some point, we will start on Firefly. And maybe every now and then we'll throw in something like this with more quote-unquote serious films. Who are you? You think you're better than us. So thank you everyone for listening. Thank you, Jerome. Thank you, Mike. Now talk over each other as I leave the floor open for a final remark. And instead, neither of you talk. That's awesome. Perfect stuff.
but you're so